Right, okay. So first thing is, while we're waiting for a few more to come on, we've got some resources to go with this workshop because I know there's quite a few of you come on from Meetup. I'll put them in the chat if you've not already registered because we've got people coming in from different. Ah, doesn't want to work. Hang on. Copy. Yes, I've just put the link for the resources. You don't have to grab it now if you don't want to, but it's just we will put a hypnosis recording and some notes and some other things. You just need to register there. Right. So, can't see what that means. All right. Okay. Thanks, Nora. See what you mean now. So, how many of you have seen me speak before, been to one of our workshops before?
Me.
I've
Yeah.
seen you before.
Yeah. Good. Julia. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so tonight's all about anxiety and what we can do to get unstuck from it. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Mark. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm an anxiety therapist. I am a nutritional therapist, EFT practitioner, master NLP practitioner, and I spend most of my time either helping people with anxiety or managing our clinic that helps people with anxiety. We've got other therapists that work with us. Um, so, first of all, what exactly is anxiety? How would you answer that?
Uh, you worries in your head constantly, loads, doesn't stop, loads of noise. You worry about things that may not happen.
Yeah, certainly. Anxiety, yeah, some people say anxiety is always living in the future about what if this could go wrong or that could go wrong. It could constantly be overthinking, problems in the head. Anything else? What else could you describe anxiety as?
Panic.
Panic. Good one. Diarrhea of the brain. I like that.
Hmm.
Sometimes the mouth too.
hmm
Fear. Yeah.
Uh, well, you can have it unconsciously and consciously as well, depending on like the type of anxiety you've got and where it shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. There's different types of anxiety. Um, and depending who you go and see, they give it very different labels. So we can have health anxiety, social anxiety, um, it's generalized anxiety. It's different types of professions put this in very different ways. So, how does anxiety make us feel?
Stressed.
Stressed, worried, can't concentrate. Um,
Paranoid?
Can do,
yeah,
yeah.
I think so. It's what sometimes feels like.
Stops you from going places.
Yeah, it can really stop you from doing
Stops your
things.
life.
Yeah. Shauna says overwhelmed, which yes, certainly can make us feel overwhelmed. Nora says pending heart attack. Now that's really interesting because the amount of clients we see who have almost like a panic attack or an anxiety attack and end up down the A&E really thinking their heart's causing a problem to just be told it's anxiety.
I've had that. getting all the signs of a heart attack, like the pain under your arm and
I have as well.
tingles. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What other physical symptoms can anxiety give us?
Fatigue.
So,
Dizziness.
yeah, dizziness. A
Not
lot of people
wanting to
complain
eat.
about tight chests.
Tight chest. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Headaches, crying, sore throat, trouble swallowing. That's something I haven't seen for a while, but we used to get it years ago, where people would get anxiety of swallowing food and would physically choke.
Oh.
That was, yeah, 10 years ago. That used to be something we'd see every week.
I get that at the dentist. The dentist said it's a long word when you're really nervous and me I couldn't swallow if I get an injection only in the bottom of my mouth. I'm all right at the top, but if my throat starts to close up, and he says it's like because you're so anxious.
Yeah. Yeah, and there'd be lots and lots of different things it can cause. So some of the things that it moves on to is it causes other health issues. Can you guess what any of those could be?
Well, for me, it can cause a seizure. I don't know about people that don't actually have epilepsy, but I know you can have seizures without having epilepsy.
Yes, whether it's actually epilepsy or seizure or whether it's something very similar, but it can push the nervous system really into a bad state. But one of the ones we see a lot is if anxiety is left untreated, it turns into sort of digestive issues. And that could be IBS, IBD, inflamed bowel. Yes, asthma attacks can be something that's caused by that. It can also cause the digestive system to not work very well, and it can also take the immune system down. The amount of people who say they get severe anxiety and they just have to go to the toilet very, very often is very, very common. It's just amazing how anxiety's got a big knock-on effect that if we don't get it sorted, it can cause all sorts of problems. So, why do you think anxiety is becoming so common these days?
Well, it's the world we're living in. It's very stressful world we're living in, isn't it?
Social media.
Hmm.
It's all corrupted.
The news as well
Mm.
doesn't help.
Increased work pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a crazy time since, well, we've had Brexit and then lockdown and COVID and a couple of wars. So it is interesting that lots of weird things are going on. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of experts now talking about the minute we get up, first thing we do is we check our mobile phone. And this just puts negative news into our head, which pushes up our stress levels. And when we're stressed for too long, it turns into anxiety. So there's a lot of things that can cause that. Anything else do you think that can be causing anxiety? What else is happening in the way people live these days? Don't all rush at once. So one of the big things we're noticing is food. People are eating
Oh,
more and more processed food, and as a result, it doesn't give us the nutrients that we need. It kind of messes up the gut biome, which isn't we know is massively linked to mental health.
There's
If we've got,
also, oh, sorry.
yeah, go on.
So what about like, because anxiety, a lot of people don't want to get out of the building, so you're not getting the vitamin D and all that stuff. What about that?
Yeah, it's a huge one. So quite often when we get sort of mental health issues, we don't go out as much as we do. And vitamin D is one part of it. but we're constantly exploring more and more things of being outside. So first of all, the blues and the greens make us feel better and relax us. They now reckon that the trees are chucking messages and fungus and mold and all sorts of things back and forwards. But it's not just the sunshine or the vitamin D. They reckon the sunshine's doing an awful lot more things to the body to look after our health. And one of the things we have seen is the recommendation for vitamin D seems to be going up and up and up, especially as we get older. Which is why a lot of experts now are saying we need to take 2 or 3 times the amount of vitamin D we used to rely on. So there's lots of things going on there.
Doesn't help him, we'll hardly get any sun anyway.
Well, that's really interesting. So a lot of people seem to get worse over the winter months. And I think the weather has changed in that we seem to have what feels to me like longer winters.
Definitely.
I've been thinking like because the colour of what it's like outside. So in the summer it makes me feel happy in that, but when it looks miserable as hell, if it's chuck it down in the summer, I will be just as miserable then as well.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Yeah, it's very, very common. We're recommending as a rule now for people who struggle with sleep and anxiety is to get up at the same time every morning and to get out into daylight as quick as you can.
circadian rhythm.
And that really seems to help. And the other thing that quite often helps are therapy lights. They look like a white Kindle. They're only about 20 odd pounds online. And it gives you full spectrum light. It's not as efficient as a regular light bulb, but it gives you the whole spectrum. And a lot of people report just by using that for an hour a day lifts anxiety and depression quite a bit. But definitely when we get to the lighter months, people feel an awful lot better. In fact, we see major differences in coal levels coming in. If the sun's shining, the coals drop right down. And as soon as that weather gets bad, they jump up again. And we can see that in a big way. So, what sort of treatments do people usually go for when they're trying to resolve their anxiety?
Say that again, sorry.
What sort of treatments do people usually move towards when they're trying to sort their anxiety?
Antidepressants.
Medication.
Anything else?
Some will go for therapy, I suppose.
Therapy.
Yeah. So I see there's a couple of people swearing in the chat. Using the words CBT and DBT. And I don't mean to knock those modalities for other things, but 90% plus of the clients who come and see us have been through CBT and counseling. Hang on, there's Adam. To find it doesn't work. Why could it be that we've got a whole mental health system pushing those therapies, but they're not actually working for people?
It's keeping it alive in your head, I suppose, isn't it? Constantly living over, do you think? Even though sometimes you've got to talk about it, but a problem, but
Yeah. So I remember when I had my anxiety problems, just to tell you my little story. I suffered with chronic anxiety for 10 years. And at the age of 16, 17, my dad took me back up to the hospital. And they kind of sat me down. And the problems I had was I developed a really bad stammer. I had IBS. I had loads of allergies and intolerances. I was having several asthma attacks a day. I was the size of a house. And I was really hoping that they were going to say, look, here's a pill that's going to take away this anxiety and solve your problems. And exactly the opposite happened. They just turned around and said, first of all, it would be a good idea to put you on disability. Don't worry about getting a job. Enjoy watching the telly. But then the other thing that happened was that they started talking about some medications I'd never heard of. And my dad was a director of a psychiatric hospital up here in Gosforth. And he went ballistic because these medications had such severe side effects. I'd seen people in those hospitals shuffling and drooling and all sorts of stuff. And my dad just went crazy. And that was quite a depressing day for me. But something that happened was I decided I was going to go away and find how to resolve this myself. And doing that myself, using the library, I got into psychology and counseling and all sorts of stuff to find most of that didn't work. And the reason being, it was all saying you had to find the root cause of the problem before you could move forward. And I hadn't had any root cause, I hadn't gone through any trauma. But thankfully, I got into self-hypnosis and NLP, and within 2 years, I started working as a disc jockey full of confidence from somebody who was really nervous with a bad stammer. And then years later, I was lucky enough just to accidentally find an NLP practitioner course, and it was the best thing I ever did. I met some wonderful people, and it gave me some amazing skills, including Judd was somebody else I found there. And it kind of got me into the therapy thing. And one of the things we know now is that neuroscience back in the 70s kind of said that when we get anxious, we fire electricity along neural pathways into the amygdala. So if a big dog jumps out at you, your brain's meant to do that, fight or flight. But if we suddenly think about that again and again, or we go through that same situation, the brain kind of creates this as a habitual neural pathway. And it just means we get stuck in that horrible state of anxiety all the time. And this happens with so many other things. It's exactly the same with depression. It's kind of, we create a physical neural network in the brain that does this again and again. And the way that we need to fix this is when we know that electricity is firing, is we need to interrupt that pattern, because the more we interrupt it, the more that falls to bits. But the key is we then need to replace it with a better pattern of feeling calm, confident, and happy. But one of the challenges is if we go for CBT and counseling and we talk about why we've got anxiety and how it makes us feel, and again and again and again, a lot of people report it makes us feel worse because we're practicing a negative pattern. And it really is interesting that there's different modalities of therapy, all have different ideas about it. It used to be we thought it was a chemical imbalance in the brain. And now we know today that's definitely not the case. And this is why NLP and hypnosis can get far faster results for these sort of problems than the poor sods who get stuck in going to therapy for year after year using CBT and counseling.
What about with like autism, ADHD, and all that on top of it?
Now there's a really good subject to discuss, because a while ago I got involved in a discussion which was about studies that showed that changing our diet can massively change ADHD and autism. And people came back
Sorry.
and argued and said, hang on, ADHD and autism is a neurotype. But what I was talking about before is known as neural plasticity, that we know the brain can change the connections and the patterns that are in there. Now, it won't cure those, but we have seen studies that with some children, the ADHD or the autism patterns dropped by about 50 to 60%. We know that with some sort of foods, for some people, certain types of protein work better than others. And the way that we look at it when I work with clients is I don't listen to the autism tag or the ADHD or the general anxiety, is we look at the patterns and then we work to unpick them and replace them with something better. And some people will argue black and white that that cannot be done. But I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman in his 70s who was having panic attacks. He'd retired and was now having to go shopping with his wife. And she would leave him in a certain part of a shopping centre locally and say, right, take these bags back to the car and meet me outside Greg's. And he would have a massive panic attack and spit his dummy out. But he was severely autistic. And I just sat and I worked with him nice and gently and said, right, you're quite clever, because he'd run a business and been very successful. I said, what resources could we use for you to get from this place to your car and then back to Greg's? And when we created a plan and gave him some tools, after 3 sessions, he walked back in and I said, how are you doing? And he just says, unstoppable. And he'd rewired an awful lot of these autism and ADHD patterns that he had. So on the one side, there's people saying, this is permanent, you can't change it. But the laws of self-directed neural plasticity tell us That's not the case, that we can make changes.
You just need to know how.
You need to know how, and sometimes we need to tailor the treatment for different neurotypes. The more I've worked with people who've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, I suddenly go, I've definitely got part of that trait. So the way that I look at this is that everybody's on the spectrum somewhere. Some people are more severe, some people are lower, but I'm also seeing a lot of people as they age suddenly feel that they're getting more and more autistic.
Mm.
And I don't know enough about the problem. I just know how I can use tools to change that for most people, as long as people are coachable. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Does the food changing, like, could that have been because they weren't getting the nutrients and protein and stuff they needed before?
Yeah. So first of all, we know that certain foods, if we're deficient in them, if the brain's not being fed, it's not going to work properly. And because so much of the diet is processed, that causes an awful lot of problems. But then the other side of it is the body's meant to produce serotonin and melatonin, which help us to feel nice and relaxed and help us to, sorry, I'll just add somebody in. Serotonin and melatonin help us feel relaxed and help us to sleep properly. But if we've got a problem, if we become intolerant to a food, if we eat the same foods day after day, we can easily become intolerant to them. And when that happens, it causes inflammation in the gut and inflammation in the brain. And then that can cause other problems in the body. So that we've seen people just who had insomnia just because they weren't producing enough melatonin.
Just to chip in as well there, Laura,
Yeah.
in the late 1990s, we had food products that were being processed with really high E numbers and content. And at that time, the number of young children being prescribed Ritalin suddenly peaked. It was incredible. And I worked alongside a woman called Bernie, whose son literally went from being a young child being interactive to a young child who was really struggling. And she went back to the doctors and really tried to make them hear what was being said. But at that period in the late 1990s, we were getting really high marketing messages. This is good. This is fun. You know, that bright coloured adverts, the food, the colours, we had like things that practically glowed in the dark. But it was, the food industry really selling it. So I feel there's a certain generation, particularly who were impacted with that marketing and really dodgy food, big style. So children of the late 1990s really had it hard. And I think we've got the legacy of that.
I think there's definitely something causing all this autism and ADHD. And there's loads of people grasping at all sorts of straws. But I think that's one of the biggest ones. In fact, if you study therapy on addictions and whether it's alcohol or food, the advertising, the manipulation has been insane. But then, yes, some of those colors and stuff were bad, but it's still happening today. So, as part of something we do, we get everybody tested. We call it an optimal health test, and it looks at food intolerances, gut biome that we know now is massively part of how our brains work. We're looking at digestive health. We're looking at vitamins and minerals. And it's insane that sometimes just one intolerance or one food can make one hell of a difference. We had a lady recently with severe depression, and when we got her tested, it was dairy, 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 just different types. And we got her off it. It took some work because she'd been brainwashed into thinking you have to have dairy for calcium. And she said after 3 days, this wave of depression, anxiety just lifted from just one food product. So it usually it used to be always psychological and it can be sort of traumatic as well. But now we're finding that the gut controls the brain and the other way around, and it causes all sorts of problems. So there's a lot of causes, and we can spend forever trying to go over the cause and find out what it is. With food, it's worth doing that. But with the psychological stuff, it's better just to spend time getting into the state that we want to be. So you can go to your doctor, Nora, and yes, you can get blood tests done and they'll look at stuff like that, but usually they don't go really deep down into intolerances and sensitivities. And there's places you can go to where you can get a hair sample taken, a hair trace mineral thing done. We do them. We've got our own company that does this for us. And then the idea is shown at, yeah, it's hard when you've got food you like, is that we coach people to take away the foods that are a problem, replace them with a much bigger range. And it's amazing how those taste buds change and that we start craving the healthy foods. Because a lot of those processed foods have got so many additives, it really makes us crave them. And again, this goes back to food addictions, as Judd was saying, marketing. It's like you can get a certain brand of tortilla chips in the supermarket, and it's absolutely loaded with MSG, sugar, fat, salt. And you can get the supermarket's own brand, which tastes almost the same, but it doesn't give people that problem. So yes, we can change, our taste buds can change with food. And that's one of the issues for people with autism, is that they kind of get stuck to a very small group of foods, which causes all sorts of problems. But then once we can get people onto them, it makes a difference. And we've got so many kids today just stick to foods because of what they're seeing advertised on the telly, rather than trying them and actually noticing what they taste like. So let's do a little experiment. What I'd like you all to do is just to close your eyes for me. And I just want you to go back to a time when you felt really anxious in the past. And what I want you to do is just to think of that time and notice 3 or 4 things you could see. Maybe notice the colors around you, things that are moving, things that are staying still. And then notice the sounds around you at that time. Just noticing the loud sounds, background sounds. And then as that anxiety was building up, I want you to think about what you could feel. Notice what sort of physical sensations you could feel. Whereabouts you felt those. And then I want to ask you if those sights, sounds, and feelings had a color, just make a mental note of of what that color would be. And if that color had a place where it lived in your body, where would that be? And if it had a shape, what shape would it be? And I just want you to make a mental note on a scale of 0 to 10. How strong is that feeling for you now? And just gently open your eyes. Okay, so first of all, let me just unmute a few of you. That color that you experienced when you felt anxious, what colors did you all pick up?
Red, black.
Right,
Red.
good. Red and black, yeah. What other colors did people get?
Red and purple.
Red and purple, okay.
Red and blue.
Red and blue. And what sort of shape did you get?
Round.
Well, I was looking at an aura around me as well.
Okay.
Panic.
And whereabouts in the body did that live?
Chest.
My chest.
Mm-hmm.
chest. So it's really interesting. Typically, those negative feelings would be red or black, dark colors, browns. And the shape would usually be spiky or have corners. And people feel it in the chest or the stomach. And it's interesting how we represent these feelings with colors and shapes. Yeah, triangles. But there can be alternatives to this. I know if I've got a goth in the clinic, they're quite often liking the reds and the blacks because they represent those as positive. So it is interesting that we unconsciously represent the feelings and colors in different ways.
See, I'm like goth and that. I may not look it, but I am into that stuff. But yeah, I'm very spiritual as well, which yeah.
Another interesting one is purples. So purple's kind of the color of hypnotherapy, but it's also the color of witchcraft, as in pagan nice witches.
Yeah.
So some people like that and some people don't. I used to work out of a clinic and they wouldn't let me have anything in the room that was black. They believed that just absorbed bad energy, which is quite strange. They were very, very spiritual and very, very old-fashioned. So it's interesting how we represent that in different ways. Now, to do it on the positive side, again, just close your eyes, everybody. And I want you to go back to a time when you felt maybe really good, really happy.
Mhm.
This might be a Christmas. It might be a holiday. And again, I want you to, when you're at this nice space, notice how good you're feeling. And just be aware of all the things you could see at this time. Again, notice all the colors, things that are moving, things that are staying still. And then notice the sounds around you in this place where you're feeling good. And then notice how good you feel at this place. Noticing the temperature of your body. Maybe your confidence levels. Levels of relaxation. And anything else you can feel that's really good. Now, if all these positive sights, sounds, and feelings had a color, what would this one be? And then if this one had a shape, what shape would this one be? And notice whereabouts you feel this positive feeling. Now, while you stay there, what I'd like you to do, I want you to focus on that positive color and that positive shape. And I want you to imagine that you can spin it round with your mind. Spinning it round faster and faster. And as you spin that round faster and faster, it begins to sparkle and glitter and gets brighter and stronger. And it starts to expand all over your body, expanding right up to the top of your head, down to the tips of your toes, and out to the tips of your fingers. And I want you to spin that faster and faster again. Breathe it in. Get that into every muscle and every cell. Breathe it in. And whatever number that is, I want you to spin that round faster and faster and push that up to a 10 for me. Keep breathing in through your nose. Spin it around faster and faster. That's right. And then just when you're ready, open your eyes. Now, I had to mute a few of you there as we were getting some noises. So when you explore that good state, what colours did you get this time?
Same
White.
color.
Same colour? Yellow?
Cream.
Green?
White.
White? Yellows? So again, typically positive colours are brighter, blues, yellows, greens. And what shapes did you get this time?
Fear.
Round still.
A star. It's an interesting one. Circle.
I just stick to round.
Good. And whereabouts did you feel this one?
My whole body.
Head.
Face and chest, head, yeah.
The arms. I spin it in the arms.
Good, good. So it is interesting. We've got a very similar pattern for negative ones and a different pattern for positive ones. And it's, how did you feel when you went through that positive revive, as we call it?
Might put a smile on my face.
So again, anxiety is just that electricity going along that neural pathway and in. And if we can learn to interrupt it and then move into a positive state, we can switch the anxiety off and move it in. Yeah, feeling like a child again. And we'll actually have lots and lots of different positive states. And it's learning to bring those on and to stack them so that we feel better on demand. And it's a bit like riding a bike. The more that we practice that, the easier it becomes. So for me now, I sound like a broken record. If somebody just opened a door and said, there's a million people out there want to talk about any subject, I can flick a switch in my head and stand up and talk. And I've just learned to do that, where I used to be really shy, anxiety, and a bad stammer. And it's insane. And that I can just do this anytime. And it's learning to get on and do things like this that helps us to get over the anxiety. And the idea of bringing up those lovely positive states work really nicely. Any questions on all of that? Nope. Okay, good, nice and easy. So the key to getting unstuck with anxiety is, first of all, recognizing that negative state that comes in. When do you find your anxiety is usually worse during the day?
Morning.
Yeah, I'd say night because my mind goes mad.
Ah. So that's interesting that a lot of people find their anxiety gets worse when the brain hasn't got anything to focus on. And then a lot of other people reckon that their anxiety is worse first thing in the morning, and that's because our cortisol is much higher in the morning. And that seems to push our anxiety up. So it's finding patterns out of it. So what I do is, in order for people to get unstuck with anxiety, is I usually say to them, just take a minute when you wake up in the morning, scan what's going on in your system, and look for anything that's unwanted. And then ask very similar questions to what we did there. You know, where does it live? What color is it? What shape it is? And just let that run for about 2 minutes. And then bring a great big stop sign up in your head. If you want to shout out loud, stop. It's a great pattern interrupt. And then go back into that positive revive of being on that holiday, that Christmas, whatever it is, and keep practicing that. And every time you notice that negative pattern come up, use that stop sign and push on that positive revive. And that works really nicely. Now, the key to this is we need to get into a routine of practicing for about 20 minutes a day. The key with sorting out anxiety is one is getting into some routine of doing something that's positive and nice for you. And then the second one is knowing which techniques to use, which is really difficult in a group situation like this. But typically in 4 to 6 weeks for most of our clients, if they're willing to put that work in and do about 4 sessions, is we eliminate that problem for good. But the difference is they replace it with confidence, relaxation, and feeling a lot happier. And you can see how this is very different to sitting down with a counselor and talking about the problems of the past again and again. So some good examples. We had a gentleman recently who used to go to the football matches as a reporter. But he found that as soon as he got on those cramped metro trains, his social anxiety came in like crazy and he would have panic attacks. And we just taught him that he gets on the train, scans how he feels, and pushes himself into a much better state. And within 3 weeks, he could get on the train without a panic attack and feel an awful lot better. And it's really about learning to master what's going on in the mind so that we can choose how we feel. And some people don't like that because they think it's then up to me to sort it out. But in truth, it is. We can choose how we feel. It's just learning the techniques to be able to do that. And that's why if you look at our reviews, we get those good reviews because we do that for people. And some people take a bit longer. Some people might take a few months, but typically it's 4 to 6 weeks. Any questions on that? Any comments?
I'm guessing it would be harder if you have complex PTSD, though.
So there's 2 things to look there. One is mostly what we do is when we work with clients is we focus on how they want to feel instead. That's what I did. I learned to figure out how I wanted to feel instead and put 99% of my effort into doing that. However, for a small amount of people who've gone through that serious trauma, we need to clear that trauma. Not for most people, but for a small percentage. And again, PTSD or CPTSD is just a label. We just look at the patterns and then we work with people to get themselves into the better state. But it's really interesting in that I recently learned a technique that within like a 30-minute heavy hypnosis session, it would sort out most negative patterns in 1 session. And that's interesting when you can learn something to do that faster. And we call that now a clearing, where we can bring somebody in or do it by video, take them through a clearing. They haven't got a clue what's going on because we work at it so fast. And it really, really works nicely. And so it depends. You know, for some people, working on the past all the time and going over it's a problem. But if we can clear it without digging into that past, we can sort it out. And in fact, to give you a good example, before I became a therapist, a friend of mine, her husband had been out in the first Gulf War, and he'd just seen village after village of dead women and children. And he was drinking a liter of vodka a night just to switch off. And I sent him off to see somebody who eventually became one of my trainers. And in 1 session, they managed to get him off the alcohol. It's just he stopped seeing all these dead women and children. And then working through the process within about 3 months, he was now out working and they got married and had kids. But all the forces were doing was sending up to somewhere in Scotland and giving him heavy, heavy medication that was causing fits. And some people believe that CPTSD is something you can't fix. I think that's just a belief. And again, this is where the experts come in and say, you have this problem, you'll never get better. People never will. But if they get the belief that they can do, sometimes it takes a lot of self-work like it did for me, we can sort those problems out. That's the difference, but it all depends on people's budgets and things that go on. So Nora said, how often should a patient attend? Again, depending on what's going on, we usually do an assessment in advance to see what's going on and see what we need to do. And the hourly fees vary depending we need a single session or a double session. And I know, yeah, we give Papa people a bit of a discount as we help them out. So it just varies from session to session, but it just depends on what people need.
I could do with some help with the CPTSD.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's something, as I mentioned, we're looking to put that group coaching program together, and we're not far off doing that. And that might make it a lot cheaper for people who can't afford one-to-one sort of therapies, is to do it in a group.
Mm.
Okay. Any questions on that? No? Good, good. Okay. So I want to teach you a couple of exercises that'll just help you to interrupt those patterns. And one of them is, can you all go and grab an object? Have you got something you can just pass from hand to hand? Might be a ball, tangerine, something that won't break when you drop it. That's it. Okay. So as I mentioned before, when we get anxious, we all do the same pattern. We breathe very shallowly in the top of the chest. We're firing electricity into the amygdala, and we're causing all sorts of problems. And if people are struggling with panic attacks, this is one of my favorite, but it also takes anxiety down. So what I want you to do is just lift your hands up about this high, and I just want you to start passing that object from side to side. But I want you to swing those hands. Oops. That's it. And as you do that, I want you to breathe in and out through your nose so that your belly's moving in and out. Keep doing that for me. So passing that from side to side, breathing in through the nose.
Oops.
And then I want you to stare directly in front of you. So you're not staring at the object, you're staring at the wall in front of you with your peripheral vision. Keep passing that from side to side. And then you can sing to yourself in your brain, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain. And if it makes you laugh, that's even better.
Already.
Okay. And then what you can do is, if you think about as you're doing this, what level that anxiety's at. And then slowly breathe, and then slow your hands down. Imagine that's just bringing your anxiety levels down. Now that's a ridiculously easy exercise, but I'll tell you why it works. We call this the bilateral exercise. You can stop when you're ready. As I mentioned before, when we get anxious, we're firing that electricity into the amygdala. And when we move our hands from side to side, we light up the two sides around the brain, and we're pushing electricity and blood in there. Now, yeah, EDMR uses bilateral as well. Now, this is the interesting thing. I had a lady some years ago who had severe, really severe anxiety. She'd had it for about 4 or 5 years. And what had happened, she was giving a huge presentation in front of a massive crowd. And for whatever reason, she had a panic attack for the first time. And from that point on, whenever she thought that she had to give a presentation, she had a panic attack. And I taught her to do this with a juggling ball. And within 3 minutes, she started to swear at me. And I just started laughing at her. And when I asked her what she was swearing at, she's going, 4 years of effing anxiety. And that sorted it out in 2 minutes. It just brought it down, and a panic attack stopped dead. And there was another one. I had a little old lady in Yorkshire I was working remotely with. She was, she would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with panic attacks. And she had to run around the garden in a 90 to stop them. They were so severe. And again, just passing a juggling ball about stopped them very, very quickly. And it retrains the nervous system to calm down and to feel really, really good. So little techniques like this, if we interrupt those old patterns, work nicely, and it retrains the nervous system to calm down and feel really, really good. So does that feel ridiculously silly and simple to do? So whenever you feel anxious, that's the first exercise you can do. It's nice and easy. And I've seen people walking around the supermarkets chucking a bottle of water from hand to hand. The only thing I'd say is make sure it's a plastic one because the glass ones break when you drop them on the floor. Yes,
Yeah, I
sometimes.
kind of do that anyway for my sensory.
Yeah. Yeah. And Nora said, was I the only one who was doing left when she was doing right? Yes. It doesn't really matter. It's just the idea of looking forward, passing something back and forwards, and giving the brain something to do interrupts that old pattern and then helps us to feel better and calm that right down. And it's ridiculously simple, but it works really nicely. Okay. Now the other one that's really good. I've taught you the positive revive while you think of something from the past to bring yourself back into the present. You've done the bilateral. The other one I want to teach you is the 3 Bs. So the 3 Bs stand for belief, body language, and breathing. And all three affect the other ones. So if we start with our body language, if you're feeling anxious, if you imagine there's a magic rope going from the top of your head, pulling you up, pushing your posture up about an inch, that body language changes how we come across to other people, but it also changes our own physiology. And then if we breathe like we're nice and calm, we'd be breathing with our bellies, nice and slowly, in through the nose and out through the nose. And then we have to examine our beliefs. And if we're thinking we're not worth it, this isn't going to work, all this sort of negative stuff, that's going to keep us in a state of anxiety. But if we change it into the positive of what would a confident, relaxed person be like, so we get our body language first with that magic rope going from our head to the ceiling. We then get the right breathing in and out. And then if we've got the belief of, I can do this, I'm worthy of this, I've done this before, that makes one hell of a difference. So what can work is negative states. If we model them, we usually are looking down and our shoulders are forward. Our breathing is very shallow in the top of our chest. We're thinking we can't do this or we're not worth it. And quite often I find anxious people are talking way too fast. But people in positive states are looking up. In fact, we know if we put red dots on the ceiling and get people to look at them, that seems to reduce depression. It's an extremely silly little thing, but that works. Smiling, if we go and smile at other people, that makes one hell of a difference. Breathing slowly and deeply, again, changes the physiology. Thinking in a positive way of, I've got this, I can do this. And talking slowly and imagining that we're confident. And this creates your own positive state. So this is where you might want to take some time and say to yourself, how do I want to feel? And what would that look like? And again, that's ridiculously simple, but it can almost be like stepping into a different version of you. And what I'll do is when I put the notes up in the portal, I'll give you a link to a cheat sheet, which helps you to all of this. And you could even go back like we did with that positive revive and think about a time when we were calm, relaxed, and confident. And again, notice what we could see, what we could hear, what we could feel. And almost step into that version of you. And then you could go out and do a task as if. So it's really funny. I've got a guy I'm working with at the moment, and he tells me he's got terrible social anxiety, and I can't see a trace of it in him, but it's all in his head. So I just get him to model when he's in the gym, when he's feeling calm and relaxed, but I get him to check his 3 Bs. And he's finding that's working so quickly for him. In fact, another funny story that I heard recently, there was a study of a guy in New York City who was getting mugged or beaten up 3 times a week. Every week, at least 3 times. And they took him in to a hypnosis and NLP practitioner, and they taught him some confidence tricks. Guess what happened? Straight away, he stopped getting mugged or attacked. How we feel inside seems to attract what happens to us in both good and negative ways. But to go from getting attacked 3 times a week to not getting attacked ever again, that's crazy just from a little bit of confidence and changing what's going on up there. Okay?